It's my first podcast, that I'm streaming live after a recent scare in terms of my health and hospitalization. So I'm back, and ladies and gentlemen, Samuel Bevan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and glad to have you in one piece, Wayne. Glad that you're all healthy and safe.
Back in action. I think this is what drives me, and I wake up excited in the morning to be able to interact with people around the world, especially inspirational figures like you. So I have absolutely no idea why you agreed to come on to this podcast. And we are based in Asia, but we do have international listeners. And today we're so glad to have you here because you're representing Snapchat, and I believe you're the international head of emerging, especially in terms of advertising. I think that's an area where a lot of our listeners are very interested in. So maybe tell us about what you do. Tell us what's happening in your neighborhood, in your city. What's going on?
Yeah, no. So first off, thank you so much for hosting us. It's actually, funnily enough, been in exactly a year today since I first landed in Singapore to kickstart some of our operations across APAC. We are slowly but surely building out a team now. So hopefully we'll have more information to come on that over the coming months. So my job at Snap is, to put it the simplest way, is to look after performance clients across our international markets. So working with a lot of advertisers who are looking to achieve a direct response result. So be it apps, be it e-commerce, you name it. Snapchat really has a solution available to pretty much every type of business that's looking to target our audience. So Snap is at the moment sitting at 238 million users. Predominantly across a number of core regions, but we're seeing growth pretty much across the globe at the moment. And yeah, the reason we're here today is to talk to you really about opening up, hopefully, some of the eyes of the world in APAC to what they can do on Snapchat and how their brand can ultimately see success on our platform.
This is amazing, and I have to, give some time to make a confession right here. I've only heard of Snapchat, I think, 3 years ago, when my kids brought it to my attention. They are the trendsetters when it comes to which are the latest apps that I should check out, and of course, they are my ears and my eyes as well. And they brought to my attention because they sent me, I think it's an AR filter that they apply to an image that is snapped using your app. And after I've seen the result, I'm just fascinated by the kind of creativity that's happening over there. And of course, I asked them this question: why are you using Snapchat instead of Instagram or Facebook? So of course, we know that Facebook has a lot of issues, right? In terms of you have so many divided opinions. It's pretty noisy over there. And they prefer to use Snapchat because it's like a camera communication platform. That's how they describe it to me. And when I saw the creativity, it's just astounding. Can you maybe tell us how, during the COVID time especially, right, how can brands and businesses actually use Snapchat to adapt and evolve and grow and continue to capture attention in this noisy world that we're living in right now?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think the first thing to really understand about Snapchat is it's different. Snap as a company, we don't see ourselves as social media. We in fact see ourselves as a camera company, and the primary use of Snapchat is for visual communications between people's kind of closest inner circle of friends. This is by design, it's by default. There's a reason on Snapchat we don't have vanity metrics. There's no comments, there's no likes, there's no shares. It's all about people really just being their true, authentic selves. I think at the moment, let's face facts, a lot of people are separated from their friends. They are struggling to maybe stay in close connection physically with people. Snapchat really is the closest thing to that physical connection you can get for this generation. At the end of the day, it's a place in which people feel safe because they know they're not being judged. Again, they're, like I said, talking to their true friends. It's really just the way in which they communicate. I think is just the simplest way to put it. I think this is the reason we've seen continued strong growth, regardless of what was actually happening with COVID. I think COVID has helped magnify some of the trends we've seen. But I think in general, again, the reason we're seeing this entire generation shift to our platform is ultimately because they were looking for that place to be themselves, have those close conversations with their friends, and not feel judged for every piece of content that they were putting online. And I think another really important thing to understand about Snapchat is unlike other platforms, we don't store and archive your pictures and images forever. Like it's very much done in a disappearing capacity where you're sending that one-to-one message and then it disappears, which if you think about what a true conversation looks like, it simulates that. And I think that's just really important for people to understand. It's so different. And for this generation, it's where they feel safe. It's where they feel like they have fun. And more importantly, it's where they're building these connections, especially during these more challenging times.
I think you put it really appropriately, and I agree 100%. And in terms of why it's such an app that I really admire as well, is that people don't judge one another on that platform because of the lack of vanity metrics, right? So you don't really measure in terms of how many people like your post, how many commented or shared. So these are the things that kids, especially Gen Z, they don't really, want to be involved in a social media platform for that very reason. So it's drawing more and more people to your platform. And you have mentioned it really well, that it's not a social media platform, it's a communication platform. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, right, which I think started sometime in March, and right now it's already the middle of October. Yeah. So it's like, do you see a lot of incredible growth in terms of like Snapchatters who are joining the platform for the first time ever, or people who are actually posting more, creating more content on your platform? Do you see a lot of brands and advertisers as well who are now using, your platform, even publishers as well, to reach a bigger audience than ever?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's actually quite I think for the fact of the matter is we're now getting into this is just the new norm. So often when we talk about the impacts that COVID's had on the business, it's actually quite a prolonged period of time. So we did a lot of research and trends at the very beginning, which I can talk to. And I think the way that we really see it now is these are just potentially the new norm. And I think there's a couple of major trends that we saw at the very beginning, which have just continued through. First and foremost, like we said, our audience continues to grow 17% year over year. In our last quarter earnings, where we reported 238 million users. We've seen a huge surge in people using it for its native reason. That's the communication side of the app. Our video and voice calls were at all-time highs. We are seeing snaps being sent and received between close friends, hitting what we traditionally get during seasonal peaks. So normally during the holiday seasons, it makes sense for that increased engagement happening, but we've just seen that happen across the board all the time now. Again, people aren't seeing their friends as much, so it does make sense when you think about it. And I think in terms of the business opportunity this represents, I think it's really interesting. I think obviously for certain businesses, COVID's been an incredibly challenging time, and they have had to pull back on marketing dollars. If we're just being fully upfront and honest, like for the travel sector, it's a very challenging time for them as an industry. But we have seen a huge surge in other industries coming fully online and digital. I think a lot of trends were already happening. And what, in my opinion, what I've seen is I think COVID's just simply accelerated them. So the shift into e-commerce being more digitally native is for all shops, for all brick and mortars. They now are having more developed websites. We're seeing huge surge in people's buying habits. And I think a good example of this is if I just look at myself personally, being a millennial, you'd think, oh, he buys loads of stuff online. The fact of the matter is before COVID, I actually really disliked online shopping, which for someone who's worked in digital advertising for nearly 8 years, that's kind of strange, you would think. But for me, I was a big fan of trying before you buy. I like the idea of getting something there and then, even like a 2-day shipping would drive me up the wall. But since COVID's happened, my eyes, for instance, have been open to a whole new world of, I actually can't see myself going back to a lot of the traditional shops that I would used to. Even if I actually look at what I'm wearing today, this shirt arrived in the post yesterday. This mic that I've got here arrived 2 weeks ago. And I think what we've typically just seen is this huge surge in both brands having to adapt to be more digital first. And then we've also seen just consumer trends change fundamentally. And I think you can see this across the globe. If you just think about when the pandemic first happened, you heard about all these nightmare stories of people not being able to get online shopping delivery dates. I think in certain markets, for certain supermarkets, you're having to book 3 to 4 weeks out just to get your groceries delivered. Like, it showed there was that huge surge in people shifting to actually increase capacity to whole new levels for companies. So Snapchat's really just been part of that journey where we've seen certain advertisers really lean in more to digital scale. Unfortunately, some haven't been able to because they're in more challenging circumstances. And I think because consumer habits have also changed, it's kind of happened in tangent in a really nice way. And we've just seen enhanced performance for our advertisers, achieving better results than ever. So it's really been an interesting one to watch. Again, I've got the fortunate position of seeing quite a lot of different brands interacting with us across a lot of industries. And no two industries have responded in the same way. It's been really interesting to view. And I think in general, there are going to be winners and losers from this period in time. And it's, to me, the ones that are winning now are the ones who have adapted quickly, and ultimately they have changed a consumer behavior or a consumer habit. And I think the last example, I know I've answered this question for a while now, but would be if you just look at the fitness industry. So many people were kind of already downloading these apps to work out from home before COVID. It was a booming industry as a whole. However, there was still the majority going to gyms, if we're being honest. Like, it was a very much actually a whole different type of person shifting to this more app-based workout. However, turns COVID, all of a sudden, actually the new majority is on these apps, and they saw this huge surge at the beginning. And we were just talking before the call there on your new habit of drinking more water, which is great. Doing the exact same here today. It's interesting to see with consumer trends, like how long it takes to actually just become an ingrained pattern for that individual. And they talk about kind of for 4 weeks, if you continually do something, you're most likely to continue it anyway. But when you get into the 12-week mark, that's just an ingrained behavior that it's actually going to be hard to change. So the fact of the matter is, we're well past that 12-week mark. A lot of consumer patterns have just changed now, full stop. And I think this is where, okay, brands are going to have to look into how they adapt during these periods.
It's very interesting that you mentioned about the importance of being able to adapt and to evolve, right? So there are definitely winners out there, like you mentioned, like those in the fitness industry. I think they have totally crushed it by bringing, fitness exercise regime right into the homes by broadcasting or live streaming some of those training advice and giving even more personal touch by doing this one-to-one or one-to-many. And I think people don't go to the gyms anymore because they realize that they can do this at home. So there's no need to worry about like contracting, a disease when you're out there, and that's just taking more risk, right? So what about SMBs and content creators? They have probably, not so established. Maybe they don't even have money and they need organic reach. And I know that right now, LinkedIn, especially as a platform, it's really underpriced when it comes to capturing attention. I think the likes of Snapchat as well is really great in terms of really great, attention that it can actually gain by creating content on your platform. So do you view that the likes of TikTok, for example, as the newest line of Snapchat, Facebook and Twitter, in terms of getting organic attention? How are you guys also helping, these content creators to get organic attention without advertising?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is something which we are looking into a lot as a platform. We recently launched our maps to the world, making it more accessible than ever for people to actually go to the map on Snap and actually search around their area to find that local mom and pop shop, check their local cafe out where they can see reviews, book their seats straight from the app. And then we are starting to really test and trial what a brand could look like on Snapchat. It's very early days for us. I think the one thing which we really want to make sure we do is if we create something for an SME to manage, it's going to drive real results for them. And I think the fact of the matter is, if you just look at the amount of platforms out there for SMEs, even to just do organic at the moment, it turns into a full-time job just to manage your numerous different feeds or whatever you do. And I think what we really, really are conscious about is making sure that we aren't just kind of replicating what other platforms are doing, but genuinely creating something that's going to drive results. And I think this is so important to understand. And a lot of people would ask, okay, why don't you just launch X, Y, Z? But the fact of the matter is, if you look at a lot of other platforms, you'll see a lot of things like pages when they're created, nearly 90% of them don't get viewed after their first week ever again. So like, what is the value for a business to do that? And I think this is where we're very kind of sensitive in making sure when we do launch a product which is more friendly for the SME community, at the heart of it is to drive results for a business. And so this is where we are very much in early testing stages. I'm really excited to see some of the launches that we've got coming in early of 2021.
That's fantastic. These are great insights, and of course, you're educating many CMOs out there right now, brands and businesses, SMBs, entrepreneurs, and some of them actually have tried different platforms: Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. They all have different audience impact, and not every platform will take the high road, right, with responsible publisher approach. So, what's Snapchat's stand in this area, especially with the pending elections, right? I think we're just mere weeks away from the US election. And of course, there's so much fake news that have been bandied around social media, lots of people spreading fake news and, with very little credible sources sometimes, or even references. People don't really believe everything that they see online. So what is your stand in terms of this area?
Yes, a great question. For us, it's so important to, again, understand the core use of our platform again, is that communication between close friends. So because of that, we don't have that ability for virality of just any user coming to the platform and creating content, gaining loads of momentum, which again, may or may not be fact checked. So I think first off, the majority of our use of the app is close friends talking to one another. So it's a closed platform in that sense. If you do look at our Discover side of the app, which is where we host our premium content, emphasis on the word premium is the key thing I say there. All of that is hand curated. We partnered with some of the world's leading news providers. We make sure that our content is credible, informative, and ultimately providing a fair, honest opinion to our users. And I think it's so important. This is one of our strongest differentiators that we probably don't put as much emphasis on. But the fact of the matter is our platform is brand safe, and you can rest assured that your brand is going to be appearing alongside premium content. It's not going to be appearing in between the other things that you were mentioning previously.
You mentioned about the Discover section. Can you maybe tell us more about Snapchat's engagement, the Discover section as well, your Snap Games? Is there a huge search? This is a huge surge of video and voice calling as well, right? Is this trend also going to continue in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, we've had Snap Games launched just over a year ago now, and then our Discover section just has continued to grow year on year. We've seen a 40% surge in growth on that side year on year. And I think one of the interesting things is we introduced this concept of Snap Originals over a year ago at our partnership summit. And the amazing thing that we've seen is a lot of shows that have been hand curated for Snapchat actually now are getting unbelievable reach, with over, I think it was 40 shows getting 10 million views in a quarter, which is pretty remarkable if you think about it for a very early stage content creation business. And so we just continue to see it going from strength to strength. And the fact of the matter is, when we look at engagement on the platform, it's, again, one of the key reasons why a lot of our users are coming back to it on a daily basis, not only just to have those conversations between their close friends.
This is fantastic. And maybe let's back up and go back to the time when you first started, right, in your career. So we are all very interested in CMO journey stories and marketer stories. So you're one of our favorite people. So we got to ask you, how did your journey get started? And we know that you have different stints or so in other fantastic companies like Facebook and Google as well. So let's back up all the way. How did you navigate the start of your career?
Yeah, so it's been an amazing ride, and I'm incredibly grateful for having the opportunity to work at some amazing companies. I think for me, I went to the University of Leicester, where At the time, I was running a small startup where in strange things happen in the world. I entered a competition which was sponsored by my first employer, Google. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, I was offered a job there where I really started my first entry point into digital advertising, working with SMEs across the board. I then shifted into working with agencies. As we all know, agencies play a fundamental role in the ecosystem for advertising. And yeah, was again very much working always in that SME space, helping agencies onboard, scale mid-tier brands, seeing success across platforms. Then went on to do a very similar job at Facebook, where I was working with some of the fastest growing businesses, and then shifted into Snap very early on, before we launched our self-serve offering, to help build out what has become one of the most powerful ads managers out there. So it's been an amazing career over the last 4 years at Snap. And yeah, just I think seeing something go from where it was to where it has become today has just been a real privilege. And yeah, it wouldn't be possible without our amazing community of both advertisers as well as users of the app. And every day I'm just incredibly grateful to be doing what I do. It's even just getting to speak to you across the world is always a bit of a pinch me moment, and something which again excites me about working in what is just a fast growing space. And I think Snap is really been a platform. Again, I've just hit my 4 years here. The reason I've loved it so much is it's a company that's really just trying to do things differently. And it's so refreshing to be part of a company that's thinking so much about its users. And then on the SME side, focusing so much on always driving business results. And for me, that's what gets me out of bed every day. If I look at some of the brands that I've had the fortune of working with, seeing them going from being this tiny 2-3 man band to employing hundreds of people in less than 3 years because of digital advertising, it's amazing. It's creating entire economies and jobs. And I think you can very easily just think about it as advertising, but actually marketing is, in my eyes, the lifeblood of so many companies. And it's just an amazing space to get to work in for me.
I think for most of the users of Snapchat, especially my kids, the Gen Z will just be thinking of Snapchat as great innovators when it comes to the plethora of AR filters that they can use to apply to their snaps, right? But for marketers, especially people like us and people who are tuning in right now, they are more interested in information where they can measure campaign results, can even do, 5 years ago, people are actually using CPMs, they're using cost per click and cost per install. Right now, you guys have already gone to such an advanced level. You can even measure things like cost of return investments as well. So what are the other things or innovations that we can expect, especially in the marketers' perspective and advertisers who are looking at you guys to come out with something new, exciting next? Perhaps you can maybe fill us in on that area.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, measurement is such just an absolute minefield. If you just look at if I think to when I started just over 8 years ago in this industry, it was all about CPMs. Like this idea of 8 years ago, if you were telling me that you could optimize towards a sale, you would have been like, what do you want about? No, I just want to get inventory at this X rate. And so looking at that advancement and now having the ability to bid on return on ad spend, bid towards certain basket sizes, all of these amazing things, I think measurement is going to just continue to go from strength to strength, because I think the fact of the matter is we all know there's a lot of platforms out there now, and media providers have to prove their value, and we have to prove that we are genuinely driving your bottom line. And I think for digital advertising, for a lot of companies, it also tips into their sales department now. It's how they generate their leads. It's how they generate, again, like I said, the lifeblood for them. So I think increasingly we're going to just see huge advancements over the coming years and how you can track every single dollar. But then I also think there is still that huge, amazing other side of marketing, which is branding. And I think a lot of people often kind of shift away from that conversation. And I think if you just look at some of the ways that we've innovated in that space, be it the augmented reality, this ability of bringing an entire shop to your house, put a car on your driveway, all of these amazing things, just it's so futuristic. It's kind of crazy. It's already happening now. It just makes you think, what's it going to be like in 2 years' time? And again, that talking about branding being so important, creating those moments. What's really interesting is what was a branding product yesterday is now becoming a performance product today, because we understand consumers, they're using it more, we're able to get some predictability into it. I think some of the innovations which we've started flirting into the industry, so it's very early stages, but again, it shows it will probably be in the masses within the next year or two, is this idea of trying on products from home, be it AR to see what that lipstick's going to look like, AR to see, we did an amazing campaign with Gucci to see what your sneakers are going to look like. We did another one with Vans. Again, I tried to be a skater boy when I was younger, couldn't skate at all, but loved the gear. So having that nostalgic moment of being able to try on the latest pair of Vans shoes from home. And actually, we're now starting to get into that world of being able to predict, okay, people who do this are likely to drive intent and actually drive purchases. So how can augmented reality look to drive DR, which again is just insane to think about. And it just shows how quickly products like ours are gaining momentum. And I think if you look into that glass ball, I think next year we really are going to continue to see the democratization of augmented reality for brands. And I think you're even going to start to see more SME type plays dipping their toes into that because they know it's going to drive performance results. And then in terms of the final thing I've touched on earlier was on the native experience on Snap. This is just another huge area in which we are investing in over the coming years.
Since you're in the business of advertising, so do you see like budgets for advertising is decreasing as a result of the pandemic? And of course, there are also opportunistic brands and businesses out there, those who are doing well during these times, who are doubling down or tripling down on budgets, which is the opposite, right, of what the rest are doing. So what's your advice to advertisers who are looking at making contextual creative at scale and maybe doing a different media ad spend and adding the likes of Snapchat in their basket versus just focusing on Facebook or Google?
Yeah, so a couple of questions I'll unpack in there. I think the first is kind of bringing back to what I was saying at the beginning of today's session around the fact of the matter is, yes, there are going to be winners and losers during this period. Some brands, unfortunately, are dealing with circumstances which are completely out of their control. But then there are others that have adapted so incredibly fast and well that, again, it's when we talk about total ad world dollars, it's hard to comprehend because for every gain you're seeing a loss. So in general, again, we saw on our platform that 17% year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter growth. Like the fact of the matter is, I think in general what we have seen is a lot probably more disruptor brands coming to the forelight more frequently. And then in terms of like contextually targeting and how to scale, I think one of the biggest challenges with these platforms is making sure you've got, like you're saying, the right creative for it. And I think one of the biggest things that people often aren't aware of is the amazing tools that they have to their disposal. If you look at Snapchat, for instance, we have a tool called Snap Publisher, which I like to call the iMovie of ads. You can literally drag and drop in a traditional ad that you may be running on YouTube or other platforms, and you can cut it down to our 10 seconds, turn it from horizontal into vertical, very easy. And again, within a matter of minutes, you can really start to create custom content in a very easy way. You talk on the second point around shifting onto other platforms. I think one thing which people often overthink about is the buying flow. If you look at majority of these platforms, the buying flow is very familiar, it's very similar. If you look at Snapchat, for instance, the first thing we do when you open the platform is we just ask you, what's your objective? And then we guide you through how to see success on our platform. So I think a lot of people get intimidated by it, but really should just get in there, trial it, give it a go, because it's a lot simpler than people expect. And the fact of the matter is, you shouldn't put all of your eggs in one basket, is the biggest thing that I talk about. If you just look at Snapchat, the fact of the matter is we do have an exclusive audience for one. So by not being on Snapchat, you're missing out on upwards of 30% of our users in markets like the US. So that's one big reason. But I actually think the biggest reason of all is, do you as a company really want to depend on one media source or two media sources? And so that's my kind of biggest challenge. Is it doesn't make, in my eyes, the most sense for sustainability for businesses to have such a high dependency on one platform.
This is fantastic. It's incredibly insightful. I think it's a great reminder, especially during dwelling time, right? Or during a lockdown. You know, this is the best opportunity to actually learn a new platform or to try new things. I think this experimental culture needs to continue if any brand is looking to not just adapt, but to evolve and grow, you know, a long-term business. So this is definitely an avenue that they should consider. Maybe due to the limitation of time, we have really finite time on this program. So hitting 30-second minute mark, we're going to do a speed round. So are you ready? Try not to overthink your answers, all right?
Let's go for it.
All right, let's get started. What is your favorite and least favorite thing about the digital advertising industry?
I think favorite thing is, again, like I said, that movement into performance and everything being accountable to a business result. And then I think my least favorite would be people overcomplicating it. It's simpler than people think. And I see so many posts everywhere. I'm like, oh my days, this is not true. It's like there's so much resource for everyone. It's such low barriers to entry.
Fantastic answer. So moving on quickly, what are your favorite sources of inspiration?
For me, one of the big things I do is I love to just find out about different business models. Huge listener of the Business Wars podcast, giving them a small plug. And then second of all is signing up to all of these, I'd say, more micro type podcasts like yourself, which are giving us insights into brands that we never would have had before.
What are your 4 biggest learnings after spending 4 years at Snapchat?
Yes, I just did a post on this the other day to celebrate. So I think for me, I think first and foremost is hiring the right people. I think I talk a lot about this, but a lot of people put so much emphasis on their first and second hire because they work closely with them. For me, I've always said you need to make sure you maintain a high bar from your first hire to your very last if you want to build a world-class team. Second of all, I think if you're working in a fast-growing company, the 2 things you need to embrace and not take for granted is opportunities it's going to throw at you and making sure that you don't get stressed or overwhelmed by them. And then the second thing is really just making sure you realize that no idea shouldn't be raised to the table. I think people think, oh, this must have been raised before. The reality is in fast-growing companies, it probably hasn't been before. And I think making sure your voice is heard. To be successful, I always say you need to make sure you focus on what's within your control. There's so much noise, so many things you can get distracted by. Even if you just look at COVID, don't dwell on the thing you can't control. Focus on the way you're going to get out of it. And then I'd say last and most important to me, and this is a little bit cheesy, but I'd say just make sure you love what you do. If you're not passionate about what you're doing day in, day out, the fact of the matter is you spend more time at work than you do at home awake. Like, you need to be extremely passionate. Otherwise, you're never going to see success.
I totally agree, especially the last one. 100% agree. So we're going to give you a last question. Which app you cannot live without, besides Snapchat, of course?
I hate to admit this very publicly, but I have no sense of direction whatsoever. I've lived in this neighborhood for nearly a year and a half, and still when I'm 5 minutes away from my house, I for some reason don't know the roads around me. So it'd have to be quite probably a boring one, but Google Maps. I literally use it every time I walk out my front door, even to get to my local shop. So I'd say Google Maps. Otherwise, I wouldn't have even made it to this call today.
Brilliant. This is perfectly splendid. And how I wish we can continue this conversation, but maybe let's do it on Snapchat. I'm going to add you later on. And you allow more true conversations, right? So other than just do it on a podcast show. So let's continue the conversation next time. And I want to thank you once more. And I really appreciate you for agreeing to come on to this podcast. So we'll see you again very soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Samuel. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was Samuel Bevan. To listen to more episodes, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Google. Or you can just simply search CMO Asia Podcast and you'll find us easily. And once you're subscribed, you'll be able to get a new episode on your smartphone, on your tablet, or computers as soon as we publish them. So please don't forget to submit your reviews and comment as well. That is really means a lot to us. So we'll see you during our next broadcast where we're going to invite someone from Liverpool FC. He's the Champions League and English Premier League champion winner, and he's a throwing coach who is currently teaching and coaching teams in Liverpool FC as well as Ajax Amsterdam, FC Midtjylland especially. So we're going to talk to him later on in slightly over an hour. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you guys shortly. Bye, ladies and gentlemen.